The amount of alcohol and cocaine Joe Walsh consumed over the span of 3 days was enough to take down a full-grown mammoth. It kept him in such a frenzied state that he once took a chainsaw to a hotel room, just out of curiosity. And then, it drove him to make an even more unbelievable decision: to run for President of the United States, with a campaign promise to make Life's Been Good the national anthem, and to make gasoline free for everyone. A wild guitarist of the 70s who nearly burned his life away in a haze of smoke and liquor, it seemed like Joe was on a downward spiral with no way back. But today, he owns a $75 million fortune, lives reclusively among luxurious mansions, quietly donates millions of dollars to war veterans, and still makes crowds rise to their feet with a single riff. This is Joe Walsh, the man who turned cracks into light more dazzling than diamonds. And this is only the opening act. Step into his world, where every note is a solo that silences the entire world. In 1949, just 2 years after Joe Walsh was born, a tragedy struck that would alter the entire course of his life. His father, a military pilot, was killed in a plane crash, leaving behind a young wife and a baby boy consumed by grief and emptiness. At the time, Joe was barely over a year old. He was too young to understand what had happened. But that loss, though still nameless, etched itself silently into his subconscious, like a first scar. His mother, a classically trained pianist, had to wipe away her tears and shoulder the burden of raising the family. She had nothing but her music-trained hands and an unbreakable heart. Day by day, she taught music, performed at small recitals, and gave lessons right in their modest home, doing whatever she could to scrape together enough to cover meals and clothes for her son. Their house was humble, cramped, and in winter, bone-chillingly cold. But no matter the hardship, music was never absent. Every night, after the city fell asleep, the piano would play, not for an audience, but as a way for the mother to unburden her soul, soothe her loneliness, and send her hopes into Joe's future. Perhaps it was those melodies that kept Joe's spirit from withering, even amidst scarcity. Still, he was a child longing for a complete home. At age 5, his mother remarried, and Joe was adopted by his stepfather. The small family began a string of never-ending relocations, from Kansas to Ohio, then to New York, and later to New Jersey. With each move, Joe had to adapt to new surroundings, new friends, new schools. But the more places he lived, the more he felt like he didn't belong anywhere. "I was always the new kid, always the odd one out in class. Every time I started to get close to someone, I had to leave them," Joe once shared. That loneliness followed him like a shadow. But one day, a small gift changed everything. When Joe turned 10, he was given a guitar, old, with rusted strings. But to him, it was a doorway into another world. Night after night, while his mother taught lessons, he sat in the next room, fumbling through his first chords, chasing every note as if decoding his own soul. The first song he learned was "Walk, Don't Run" by the Ventures, a light surf rock tune brimming with freedom. From that moment on, the guitar became his truest companion. At Montclair High School, Joe played the oboe in the school orchestra, an intricate, often overlooked instrument. But Joe always gravitated toward the unconventional. Still, despite its discipline, the oboe could never give him the same release as a guitar. Classical music required strict structure, but the guitar let him scream, weep, rage, and dream all at once. Joe's childhood didn't speak through words, it sang. He wasn't good at expressing his emotions, but music let him tell the stories no one else could hear. When you're a kid who always feels left behind, only music can make you feel truly heard. As he entered adulthood, Joe enrolled at Kent State University, hoping to find stability. But once again, life pulled him into the whirlwind of history. On May 4, 1970, Joe witnessed the Kent State Massacre firsthand, one of the darkest moments in American history. During a protest against the Vietnam War, the National Guard opened fire on students, killing 4 and wounding 9. Joe wasn't just a bystander, he was there, feeling the chaos, watching friends fall. It left a deep emotional scar. "I couldn't believe something like that could happen in America," Joe said. "I saw the senselessness, the helplessness, and I knew I had to do something with my life." Soon after, he dropped out, not out of despair, but because he realized life was too short not to live authentically. For him, music wasn't just an escape, it was a calling, a way to do something meaningful in a world consumed by madness. And from that moment on, Joe Walsh was no longer a lonely boy or a student unsure of his path. He became a sensitive, introspective soul, carrying unnamed sorrows, ready to turn his wounds into sounds that would touch millions of hearts. From the cold days of childhood to the horror at Kent State, Joe Walsh's life was a chain of loss and loneliness. But from that darkness, he found his voice, a voice in music, one that's sorrowful, fierce, and full of hope. And the world would come to listen. After the losses of his childhood and the trauma of Kent State, Joe Walsh didn't collapse. He gripped his guitar, stepped out of the shadows, and began a journey toward glory that no one could have foreseen. In the early 1970s, Joe officially embarked on his professional career by joining the rock trio James Gang in Ohio, a 3-man band with an explosive onstage energy. Under Joe's hands, the guitar ceased to be just an instrument. It became fire. The track Funk Number 49 is proof of that. With its fierce riff and signature solo, Joe didn't just play guitar, he made the audience breathe with every strum. Success came fast, but that very success made Joe feel boxed in. In a trio, creativity had to be balanced, had to be just enough. But Joe was never someone who settled for enough. In 1972, he left James Gang, not out of conflict, but out of a need for freedom, a space where he could soar fully with his music. Not long after, Joe formed Barnstorm with former classmate Joe Vitale and Kenny Passarelli. They weren't chasing the spotlight, nor did they need scandals to get noticed. They just needed the music. And in 1973, The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get was born. A deeply emotional record, featuring the hit Rocky Mountain Way, which launched Joe to new heights. Rocky Mountain Way wasn't just a rock song, it was a declaration. Written after Joe left behind the chaos of city life and moved to Colorado, the track reflects the freedom, peace, and profound introspection that had taken root in his soul. The slide guitar echoes like wind over mountaintops, wild yet poetic. It embodied liberation, both musically and spiritually. During those years, Joe distanced himself from the industrial centers of the music world and chose to live among Colorado's natural beauty. It was a time for self-rediscovery, quiet, thoughtful, and wildly creative. Surrounded by mountains and wilderness, his music grew richer, more personal than ever before. Then, in 1975, fate called again, this time with an opportunity that would place Joe among the ranks of one of the greatest bands in American history, the Eagles. When Bernie Laden, the Eagles' lead guitarist, left the group, the remaining members knew they needed someone not just technically brilliant, but musically bold. They chose Joe, and just 1 year later, in 1976, the legendary album Hotel California was released. It became the pinnacle of the Eagles' career, and Joe Walsh was the force that breathed fresh life into the band. He crafted the electrifying riff in Life in the Fast Lane, an anthem of American wildness in the 1970s. He also joined Don Felder in the epic dueling guitar solo in Hotel California, a performance now regarded as the holy grail of guitar rock. We are all just prisoners here, of our own device. The lyrics echo like a haunting whisper beneath the spotlight, and Joe's guitar weeps alongside it, like the voice of someone who has lived in darkness. Hotel California was a phenomenal success, selling over 32 million copies worldwide, winning a Grammy, and cementing the Eagles as an American music institution. For Joe, it was undeniable proof. He wasn't just a great guitarist, he was an artistic soul of an entire generation. In 1998, along with his bandmates, Joe Walsh was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a monumental recognition of a journey that began with an orphaned boy in Wichita and led to the peak of global music. Success swept over Joe like a storm. Big stages, bright lights, thousands of screaming fans, all of it was deserved. But inside, there remained a silent void that no amount of fame could fill. Even after the world embraced him, Joe still felt like an outsider, a wanderer carrying old wounds. He once said that success didn't arrive like a refreshing summer rain, but like a storm that blows everything away, good and bad alike. His time with the Eagles, though musically magical, wasn't always smooth. Joe, with his wild, rebellious spirit, had to learn to coexist with rules, schedules, and towering expectations. But it was that very contrast that made the Eagles shine brighter than ever. Joe brought something raw and edgy to the band, a challenge, a bite. He was the sharp knife in a set of fine cutlery, sometimes dangerous, but essential to creating a masterpiece. And during that golden era, Joe never stopped writing, never stopped searching for his own identity. On tour, he kept a small notebook with him, scribbling ideas, lyrics, or just raw emotions felt alone in an unfamiliar hotel room. Music, for him, wasn't just work, it was life, his compass in a world that never stood still. But stage lights don't always bring clarity. As fame soared, schedules piled up, and nights blurred into more nights, Joe turned to alcohol. At first, just to unwind after shows. But slowly, it became routine. Cold beers backstage turned into bottles of whiskey. Sleeping pills became wake-up pills. And then, there was no stopping. No one noticed, because Joe still played like a god. But inside, the cracks began to show. Red-eye flights, nameless hotels, the same applause over and over. It all started to feel empty. There were times I didn't even know what city I was in or who I was playing for. I just knew I had to play. Those were the first signs, and they quietly dragged Joe toward a darker chapter, where fame became a chain. Amid the spotlight, Joe Walsh was a true artist, brilliant but cracked. And when fame reached its peak, the shadows of rock and roll life began to emerge. With an estimated net worth of around $75 million, Joe Walsh doesn't just live, he lives like a true icon of American rock. Every mansion, every muscle car, every unique indulgence reflects one thing. He didn't just succeed, he turned his life into a lavish, unmistakable work of art. Studio City, California, the mansion of melodies. For nearly 3 decades, Joe Walsh called a 5,000-plus square foot mansion in Studio City, California home, a precious gem in the San Fernando Valley, where golden sunlight dances on the palms. Perched proudly atop a hill, the house offers sweeping views of the city, like a musical fortress amidst untamed nature. Inside, black Italian marble floors gleam beneath a colossal fireplace carved with a 24-carat gold-plated eagle, a nod to the eagles, shining as brightly as Joe's own melodies. A handcrafted rosewood bar is where he mixed whiskey while admiring his wall-mounted guitar collection. Each piece a masterpiece worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. A sprawling balcony where Joe sipped red wine and watched the sunset was fondly named a moment of silence in the storm. When it was sold in 2018 for $1.9 million, people said its true value wasn't in dollars, but in the music born within its walls. Beverly Hills, personal studio, and the art of living. In 2013, Joe stepped into the elite paradise of Beverly Hills, purchasing a sleek modern home for $3.95 million. A bold declaration of rock luxury. The crown jewel was a 600-square-foot recording studio he personally designed, featuring soundproof mahogany walls, Swarovski chandeliers that shifted color with the beat, and a blend of vintage analog gear with cutting-edge digital tech. More than just a studio, it was his musical meditation room, where he played guitar and felt every vibration. Outdoors, a saltwater pool shimmered under LED lights, with underwater speakers playing Life's Been Good every time Joe swam. The interior was upgraded with his signature rock luxury style, leopard skin sofas, and blackened bronze chandeliers. By 2019, he moved on with $4.6 million in hand, leaving behind a legacy the Beverly Hills elite still whisper about. Sherman Oaks, a villa of cinema and light. In 2023, Joe acquired a single-story modern villa in Sherman Oaks, California, a masterpiece of technology and artistry. Though the value remains undisclosed, insiders describe it as the most advanced integrated sound light home system in the western U.S. Its opal-tiled infinity pool shimmered like a rainbow, complete with a heated whirlpool for unwinding after long days. The backyard featured an outdoor DJ booth where he once hosted parties with friends like Ringo Starr. But the true gem was the private home cinema, a curved IMAX-grade screen, crocodile leather seats from Italy with automatic recline, and a solid gold espresso machine serving Joe during late-night screenings of Casablanca or The Last Waltz. A home like this surely costs millions, a hidden paradise tucked in the valley. Montecito, a nature sanctuary for a quiet soul. In Montecito, the serene land of the ultra-wealthy, where Meghan Markle and Oprah call home, Joe Walsh owns a sprawling 2-acre estate with a 6,000-square-foot ranch-style mansion. Surrounded by towering eucalyptus, a Japanese Zen garden with natural hot springs, and a fragrant herb greenhouse, it's the definition of peace. The main bathroom boasts a handcrafted jade bathtub overlooking poetic natural scenery. A climate-controlled vinyl vault, protected with bulletproof glass, houses Joe's collection of rare records, played through a $500,000 Bowers & Wilkins audio system that brings 1960s and 70s recordings back to life. It's more than a home. It's Joe's spiritual refuge, where he seeks calm amid the storms of life. Currently listed for $7.6 million, Joe once said, "It's a world of its own, worth more than any number." But for Joe Walsh, a house is just where you live. A car is how you live. On America's roads, Joe doesn't just drive, he blazes trails, commands attention, and expresses his soul through machines not made for the average man. Shelby Mustang GT 500, symbol of speed and American nostalgia. Standing like royalty in Joe's opulent garage is the Shelby Mustang GT 500, a muscular American beast with a supercharged V8, pumping out over 700 horsepower. Its jet black body and fiery red racing stripes evoke rebellion and freedom. Joe drove it across the winding highways from California to Nevada, letting the roar of the engine drown out life's troubles. Its hand-stitched leather interior features a dashboard engraved with Carroll Shelby's signature, a personalized gift Joe had custom-made. "I don't just drive it," he once said. "I live in every rev of the engine." A masterpiece like this might be worth hundreds of thousands. But to Joe, it's as priceless as his greatest riffs. Maserati Grand Sport, where artistry meets elegance. Speed isn't his only obsession. Joe is also drawn to elegance. Enter the Maserati Grand Sport, a V8-powered Italian beauty, painted in shimmering midnight blue. The wine-colored hand-dyed leather interior hugs him like a bespoke glove. A Bose sound system, tuned by Joe himself, plays his favorite classic rock tracks at perfect frequencies. And every time the door opens, hidden speakers greet him with "Life's been good," like a nightly ritual of arrival. This is his choice for night drives around Los Angeles, city lights gleaming off the polished body, turning him into a lone artist wandering his own kingdom. 1938, Chrysler Imperial, timeless sophistication. The oldest gem in Joe's collection is a 1938 Chrysler Imperial, a restored masterpiece from the golden age of automobile design, which he tracked down and bought from a collector in Texas. Painted in pearl silver, with chrome grills polished to mirror finish, and a cream leather and walnut interior scented with history, it's pure class. Joe only drives it on special occasions, like charity galas or Eagles tributes, usually dressed in velvet suits and round sunglasses like a 1940s Hollywood star stepped out of the silver screen. Its inline-8 engine may seem modest today, but thanks to updated air suspension, it glides like one of his ballads. Price? Unnamed. But to Joe, it's a time machine, more valuable than gold. Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat, rage cast in steel. The latest monster in Joe's garage is the Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat, a brutal modern machine with a supercharged 707 horsepower Hemi Viv 8, dressed in searing flame orange paint like stage lights at a rock show. Black and orange leather interiors complement a 15-inch touchscreen loaded with his personal playlist, from Funk number 49 to Hotel California. He calls it the Speed Demon, the car he turns to when stress needs to be burned away in horsepower rather than riffs. Every detail is customized. Titanium exhausts rumble like thunder, and forged alloy wheels are inlaid with Swarovski crystals that shimmer under city lights. When Joe tears down the Pacific Coast Highway, the engine roars like a symphony of fury, a luxury toy only a rock god could command. His cars are declarations of speed, but deep inside Joe Walsh lies a far more intricate world. Behind the wheel, beyond the thunderous engines, lives an artist with strange, exquisite passions that reveal his true depth. Luxurious passions, a life lived in full color. Joe Walsh is more than an artist. He's a connoisseur of life, a lover of experience, and a man unafraid to invest in transforming everyday moments into living art. One of his most unusual and beloved hobbies is ham radio, a seemingly old-fashioned pursuit, yet one that blends technology, craft, and global connection. In his mansion, Joe built a dedicated radio room, outfitted with classic transmitters and custom antennas, where he regularly chats with fellow enthusiasts across the world. It's his escape, a quiet refuge powered by the hum of radio waves. Joe also owns a prized collection of tube amps and analog recording equipment from the 60s and 70s, time machines worth tens of thousands each. He doesn't collect them for value, but for their raw, authentic sound. something only true audiophiles can appreciate. When not touring, Joe often retreats to his studio, re-listening to old recordings through his personalized system, not to reminisce, but to relive the original emotion. Travel, too, is an integral part of Joe's lifestyle. Not the typical vacation, but cultural immersion. After shows, he stays back in cities like Tokyo or Rome to visit museums, theaters, and artist districts. Once, he quietly remained in Florence for 2 weeks just to study Renaissance painters and buy limited edition prints from a 300-year-old art house. And while he doesn't publicly own a private jet, insiders know Joe frequently charters luxury jets for personal trips. His favorite? The Gulfstream Jazzy 450, spacious, smooth at high altitudes, with its own onboard lounge where Joe sips whiskey and writes lyrics at 40,000 feet, suspended in perfect silence. In fact, on one European tour flight, he famously requested Bach's music to be played throughout the night, saying, "Let the sacred notes give my mind the rest it deserves." To Joe Walsh, living in luxury isn't just about wealth. It's about taste, depth, and devotion to detail. His possessions aren't just signs of success. They're the roadmap of a soul who once lived in shadows and now basks in the light, full of passion, personality, and pride. But beneath the glitz and glam remain scars that have never quite healed. The spotlight may dazzle, but it also exposes shadows not everyone is ready to face. For Joe Walsh, behind the glamour lies a brutal war, with none other than himself. Fame burns bright, but it always casts a shadow. For Joe Walsh, the light of glory didn't arrive gently. It came at the cost of loneliness, doubt, and a whirlwind of inner chaos. Addiction, when a genius runs from himself. At first, alcohol and drugs were tools for relaxation, but gradually they became an escape hatch. From childhood trauma, the unbearable loss of a daughter, and the disintegration of self in the relentless grind of fame. He once admitted, "I wasn't addicted to any substance. I was addicted to not feeling anything." There was a time he woke up in a strange hotel room in Paris. No memory of where he'd flown from or why he was there. No joy, just a terrifying void. A quiet love in the darkness. During his darkest years, Joe was involved with a mysterious woman, rumored to be a dancer named Kristen. She drifted into his life like a midnight companion. They wandered across California, living in a haze of dim lights, endless music, and intoxication. She once said in an interview, "Joe is a beautiful song, but playing it too long hurts your hands." It wasn't a bad love, but it was born in smoke and vanished just as quietly. Stevie Nicks, When Love Isn't Enough to Stay. During the era of cross-country tours with the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac, Joe met Stevie Nicks, and between them sparked a connection that was both fierce and fragile. Stevie once said on live television, "Joe Walsh was the greatest love of my life." They shared music, inspired mornings, and quiet nights with guitars in hand. But Joe walked away, not because he stopped loving her, but because he loved her too much to drag her down with him. "I left because I knew if I didn't, one of us would die." Moments of madness and the cost of freedom. There was the time Joe brought a chainsaw into a hotel room just to check the wall structure. The room was destroyed. A permanent ban followed the next morning. Another time, on an international flight, he burst into the cockpit, high out of his mind, and asked the pilots if they were flying backward through time. No one was harmed, but from then on, Joe only flew private, for safety and silence. Turning despair into a joke. Running for president. In 1980, Joe Walsh publicly announced he was running for U.S. president under the slogan, "I'll make life spin good," the national anthem. People laughed. The press called him eccentric. But maybe it was a cry for help, a search for purpose, for someone to truly listen as his world spiraled out of control. Losing a daughter, a scar that never heals. In 1974, Joe's first daughter, Emma, died in a tragic car accident. She was just 3 years old. Joe went silent for weeks. He barely spoke to anyone. He wrote song for Emma as a farewell, a lullaby wrapped in grief. Every time he plays it, he doesn't just cry for her. He cries for the part of himself that died with her. Rehab, rebuilding from the rubble. In 1994, Joe checked himself into rehab. No manager, no intervention, no press release. He was simply exhausted. 6 months to cleanse the body. A year to heal the mind, and a lifetime to hold the line, to stay upright. Then, the day came. Sober for the first time in decades, Joe returned to the stage. He picked up his guitar, played Rocky Mountain Way, and broke down. For the first time in years, I heard the true sound of my guitar. The scandals once nearly destroyed Joe Walsh. But from the bottom, he rose again. Not as a star that only shines, but as a man who's cracked and found light leaking through those fractures. After all the highs and lows of life, Joe Walsh didn't just reclaim his place on stage. He etched a lasting legacy through smart investments, philanthropy, and powerful artistic collaborations, cementing his status as a living legend. Wealth and investment, building a lasting foundation. With a career spanning decades, Joe Walsh has built a considerable fortune. A significant part of it stems from smart real estate investments. In 2023, he purchased a luxurious bungalow in Sherman Oaks, California, for approximately $2.345 million. The home spans 2,446 square feet, featuring 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a private movie theater, swimming pool, and secluded garden. Previously, he owned several high-value properties, including a villa in Beverly Hills, reflecting not only refined taste, but a lifestyle rooted in quiet elegance. Artistic collaborations and performances, bridging generations and styles. Joe Walsh continues to push musical boundaries through eclectic collaborations and unforgettable performances. Live at Sphere, Las Vegas, 2024 to 2025. Alongside the Eagles, Joe joined a residency at Sphere, a state-of-the-art venue in Las Vegas. Due to overwhelming demand, shows were extended into December 2024 and March 2025. The event drew loyal fans and introduced the Eagles' music to a whole new generation. Post Malone at VetSaid 2024. Joe planned a special performance with genre-defying artist Post Malone for VetSaid 2024. A bold fusion of classic rock and contemporary sound that promised something raw and electric. Stephen Stills at VetSaid 2023. In 2023, Joe reunited with fellow rock legend Stephen Stills on the VetSaid stage, delivering mesmerizing duets that honored their legacy and captivated the crowd. Philanthropy, giving back to veterans and the planet. As the son of a military pilot, Joe Walsh has always held a deep respect for veterans. In 2017, he founded VetSaid, a nonprofit dedicated to funding local veteran support groups through benefit concerts. VetSaid 2024, scheduled for November 11, 2024, at UBS Arena in Belmont Park, New York. The event was set to feature Eric Church, Toto, Kool and the Gang, and Post Malone. However, it was ultimately canceled due to circumstances beyond control. Despite this, VetSaid still pledged $400,000 to previously announced charities, a testament to Joe's unwavering commitment to the veteran community. VetSaid 2023. Held at North Island Credit Union Amphitheater in Chula Vista, California. The show gathered an all-star lineup, with Joe and Steven Stills delivering memorable on-stage chemistry. Beyond music, Joe also serves as the honorary chairman of the Santa Cruz Island Preservation Foundation, reflecting his dedication to protecting the environment and natural heritage. Joe Walsh didn't just survive the storm. He lived through it, deeply, fiercely, and left a mark not just on music, but on those who've ever wandered through the dark and looked for a light. Joe Walsh, a name forever tied to scorching guitar riffs, timeless anthems, and a life of poetic contradiction. He stood on the highest peak and fell to the deepest pit. He lost everything, then picked up each broken piece to rebuild a life full of meaning. I'm proof that you can wreck your life and put it back together better than before. Joe Walsh. To him, music was never just for show. It was prayer. It was a compass. It was the trembling voice that helped him find his way back. And maybe, in each of us, there are melodies, deep notes, wild crescendos, and the aching silences in between. What matters most is that we keep playing. Because as long as you play, your life keeps singing.